everybody. Welcome to Batching Day for Straight Talk with Sally. I'm so excited to have you here. We have our final guest of today coming up soon, Ben, Ivey. And also, don't forget, if you want to get access to the VIP room, you can join us in Sparkle Clubhouse. So head on over to Sparkle Clubhouse, come on into the VIP room, get in behind the scenes, and you'll be able to talk to us as well in the background. Now, if you are catching us live, then you can totally comment. I have a chat box showing box showing up. So I'd love to be able to test that in this stream. As you can tell, if you go back to the beginning, the very first episode that we had here this morning, all pixelated, and I feel really bad now. I want to bring that guest back and fix it all up. And we've got more and more fancy as the day has progressed. And now we also have I don't know if we do until somebody actually comments, but put a comment below the video and hopefully it'll show here in my little chat window and I can do a little share up onto the screen. We'll see. All right, now let's reset for the live interview, which of course we will be editing and putting it onto the podcast. But today you're catching us during Batching Day. Why not share the content while we're doing it? Feel free to chat away and ask questions. And I will ask my team to monitor the chat on the other places that we're live streaming, and just let me know if comments are coming in, and then we know if they're working or not working. All right, so let's get into our final interview of the day. So my guest today is a thought leader, a business coach, and a global speaker. He's spoken at over 200 events internationally. He's worked with Fortune 500 companies like Coca-Cola, HSBC, and he inspires teams and helps to increase business growth. He founded the Entrepreneur Lifestyle, helping overworked and overwhelmed entrepreneurs to become more efficient and boost their business success. And I was a guest on his podcast, and now he's one for me as well. So I would love you to help me welcoming in Ben Ivey. Here he comes. Yay! Hi, welcome to Straight Talk with Sally. How are you?
I am doing very well, Sunny. It's nice to be on the other end of the podcast for a change this time. So I'm excited for you to throw some questions at me as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, well, today's topic I'm so excited about. It is about procrastination, and so many people struggle with procrastination, and you're going to help us master business procrastination. And you've got 6 different types of business entrepreneur procrastinators. So tell me, before we get into that, a little bit about yourself and, a little bit of background for our listeners and viewers to learn who you are.
Yeah, of course. So previously, I was running, I've run a couple of businesses before. I was running a business in Silicon Valley, and I felt myself burning out. And on top of that, I ended up losing my father to suicide, and that just completely shifted my world. We were best friends. I saw him the day before, and it just took me on this journey where I started to think, like, why is it that we create these parallel worlds, one which people see and the reality of what's going on underneath. So I ended up quitting my business in Silicon Valley, and I started traveling all over the world, from LA to China to the UK, searching for answers and figuring out, number one, what happened to my dad, and also, why is it that we go through this process? Like, how do we become fulfilled in life? And I basically went on this journey. So as I started to go through, I attended hundreds of different events at different places. I started speaking on different topics, just to kind of dive into what is it that really matters to us in life. As I started to go through, I realized that entrepreneurs are people that are incredible people, but they often become very isolated, and we often self-sabotage our own success. So I started to go through that over the past 8 years or so. I've now specialized in working specifically with entrepreneurs who've been struggling with self-sabotage and overwhelm and not being able to move forward. And that journey has taken me to doing TED Talks in Chinese, being interviewed all over the place in different places. And then in 2016, I also started to teach people to do what I do too. So I now have a team of trainers that work with different entrepreneurs as well. So we have our online program, and I feel very blessed that we're expanding our impact. And starting to help entrepreneurs from all walks of life to really move from overwhelm to be that consistent entrepreneur where they're actually thriving in business and in life.
Wow. Look, you've been on a wonderful self-discovery to get to where you are. That's so awesome. I'm so excited. This is one of the best topics out there. I know whenever we've run workshops or conferences, anyone that puts the word procrastination in their title gets so many people wanting to do their workshop. So I know that lots of people are going to be really super interested in learning about what are the 6 types of entrepreneur procrastinators. Please share. I'm really interested to hear.
Cool. So let's go through them one by one. And I think what's fascinating about them is that I've just identified these through working with hundreds of different clients and just seeing what is it that really stops someone from really moving forward in a way that's sustainable. Because I think we all say we want to do things, but we often don't stick to it. And one of the biggest complaints I get from people is, I'm just not sticking to what I need to do in order to build the business, to move myself forward, and start to make it happen. So the first entrepreneur procrastinator is the avoider. So the avoider is someone that has lots of tasks to do, but tends to avoid the major tasks at all costs. Like they know there's something big to do today, and I'm like, okay, well, before I do that, I need to make a coffee. And before I do that, well, I should probably go on a run, and then, I've got a text, and now I need to reply to some emails. And what ends up happening is they just keep off-putting the tasks that they have. Now, this very often comes down to imposter syndrome. They feel like they aren't able to do that. They may put off doing videos. They may put off putting out content, put off reaching out to people, because very often they don't believe in themselves. They feel like they're being that imposter to be able to move forward. So the first one is the avoider. Now, the second is the dreamer. So the dreamer is someone that wants to do loads of things, but just feels like they're very good at what they do. People should just come to them. Like that makes sense, right? They're really good at what they do. And this is where they're building the most amazing houses in the middle of nowhere. Often they won't do marketing, they won't do these different things. They think, like, I'm very good at what I do. And they have this dream in their head that they want to be able to move forward. And what they tend to do is delay a lot of things. And they don't move forward in a way that's actually sustainable. So we've got the dreamer, we've got the avoider. Next, we have the perfectionist. And for the tech entrepreneurs out there, I think this is very, very common. I cannot tell you how many different tech entrepreneurs I've worked with that struggle with this. The reason why I say that is in tech, it's very important to get things that are perfect. And the reason why I say that is because you're building a system, you can't have bugs. So you're constantly looking to tweak the things and make it perfect. The challenge there is when it comes to other things like marketing or building the business forward in a different way, what tends to happen is that you are attempting to make everything perfect, you're getting yourself overwhelmed, and you end up in this analysis paralysis, whereby you don't move forward, and often you're seeking knowledge, you're getting this information overload, but you're not doing anything with that. And what tends to happen is tech changes so quickly, trends change so quickly, you end up thinking, oh, well, now I've got to learn a new app or something new, and you end up just being in this zone where you don't do the tasks you need to do in order to move the business forward. So next, we have the warrior. Now, it's not a warrior, it's a warriors. This is where they're constantly worrying about what will happen. There's often that fear of failure. There's worrying, well, what will people think? There's worrying about, is this really okay? Like, what happens if this doesn't work? And what tends to happen is the warrior will keep doubting themselves, and they'll have that self-sabotage. Well, they'll start to make some progress in their business, but as soon as they get some level of fame, some level of success, there's that element of, oh my God, well, what happens if this doesn't work out?
Okay, hang on. So I'm so sorry. So this is the awesome, well, not so awesome part of live streaming, that the audio wasn't working on your end.
Nice.
And we have to go back to the beginning. Sorry about that. And for those live streaming people out there, because we're batching, we do actually need the audio to be working to be able to turn it into a podcast. Joyce, is the audio working okay in the background now, honey? Can you just talk a little bit for us, Ben? This is our technical difficulties.
Sure. This is our testing the audio.
Is that better, Joyce, on the live stream? 1,
2, 3. Am I coming through nice and clearly? If not, let me know. I'll just, unless people are watching this and being a good lip reader, I mean, you're just going to have to lip read as best you can, because otherwise.
Oh, and you gave such great stories as well. Well, luckily the girls were actually, yes.
It's okay. I can just enunciate my words and we can just have people
a little
to,
higher, she's saying.
listen a little
Okay,
more.
cool. All right, how's that?
Okay, if I just keep chatting.
Yeah.
When you say a little higher, do you just want me
Oh,
to
I think the
keep
girls are
speaking
telling me to turn the
louder?
volume up on my end.
Okay, cool. Just checking.
We may have to overlay the intro. Luckily, what we've got actually, those guys out there, we've got 2 backup recordings running. So we've got Zoom recording the audio, and we've actually got 2 people recording the audio in Zoom, and also the live broadcast. But I didn't want to go through because those who are watching the live stream right now will be missing out on all the sound. So let's just start from, we can totally overlay your intro, but then I really want the guys out there who are catching the live stream to be able to learn the 6 different types of procrastinators. So I was getting right into that as well. So no need to repeat because it's recorded. Everything from Zoom is what they're telling me. Well, let's
we can fly through them for the people.
Let's do it, and the girls can figure that out when you edit. Thank you, girls.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Should I do the brief version for those listening, or should I just do the exact same thing?
Oh, look, just go into it again. Let's do it, and we know it's all working.
Let's dive into it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, it's so important. We might as well might as well repeat it again. Okay. So there's 6 types of different entrepreneur procrastinators. All right. The first one is the avoider. So the avoider is someone who has lots of tasks to do, but just tends to avoid actually doing them. I'll give you an example. So you could have, I had a client that had a multi-million, portfolio of properties and had to go visit them and actually manage and make sure everything was okay. But she would much prefer to just play some golf. It sounds silly, but she was literally just avoiding that task. She knows it's important, but she was avoiding it at all costs. And the sad thing about this is very often by avoiding those tasks is actually detrimental to the sustainability of our business. And especially for creative entrepreneurs who get started in business, what tends to happen is they avoid the tasks they don't enjoy doing. So that's why we have a lot of creative entrepreneurs that don't do the marketing. They don't do the sales. Obviously, Sally's the expert there. So if you're listening now, you're going to chat to Sally. All right. That's the avoider. All right. Next, we've got the dreamer. So the dreamer is someone who has that goal that they want to achieve. They start to make some progress towards it, but they tend to feel that they're very good at what they do. They shouldn't have to do anything else really to help them move forward. So what they do is they just do what they love and they don't do anything else. And the challenge there is they procrastinate on all the tasks that actually matter in their business, because very often what we love and what correlates to business growth isn't the same thing. And this is where when you first start out, you have to do those elements that you perhaps don't enjoy so that you can end up doing what you enjoy thereafter, which is very important.
It's so important.
It is. So next we've got the perfectionist. Now, there are so many different types of perfectionists out there. And the problem with being a perfectionist is very often this can come in the form of creatives and also especially tech entrepreneurs. So if we look on the side of the creative entrepreneur, there was a lady that I worked with called Anna who had her own fashion business. And what would happen is she would go through all the different clothing lines and prepare them for different trade shows in New York. So she'd go through it and then suddenly she'd have like most of the batch done, like 80%. It took her a month. And then she'll spend 2 months attempting to perfect things, throwing things away, bringing it back in. And there's an element where that is important, but sometimes if we want things to be too perfect, it tends to have a negative impact on our business because we procrastinate on other things. And this is where we've got to be able to move things forward and not get stuck in that analysis paralysis and not avoid making the decision that actually move the business forward. Yeah. So next we've got the warriors, and not warrior, once again, the warrior. Just want to make sure that's clear. So the warrior is someone who tends to just worry about their success. There's often that element of fear of failure, there's self-sabotage. And for those of you who don't know what that self-sabotage is, it's where you have that internal conflict. You go through these oscillations. And so what happens is you'll have some great growth. I took on a recent client and she says, I've got periods of great growth for a few months, and then I'll literally chill and I'll burn out, and then I won't do anything for a few months thereafter. And her business is doing $1 million a year, but she's just going through these huge stages of growth and then downhill. So what's very, very important as entrepreneurs is that we understand that what we want is sustainable success. And this is where we've got to move out of that worrying, that self-sabotage. We get to a certain point and then we go downhill because we want to maintain that momentum. So those are the first four. So we've got avoider, we've got dreamer, perfectionist, warrior. Next, we've got the crisis creator. Okay. Now, the crisis creator is someone that loves to do things last minute. So what tends to happen is that they end up creating different crises for themselves because they don't do things in advance. So what often happens for these types of entrepreneurs is they're reactive instead of proactive. Now, what's great about that is they start to move forward and they kind of deal with things. But the challenge there is they often feel overwhelmed because they're taking on so many different things. These are often people that say yes too much. There's an element there that can be seen of people pleasing, where they're wanting to do so many different things at once that they end up just creating this problem for themselves, and they'll chill out for a few weeks and suddenly literally not sleep for a week because they're constantly trying to do everything. The challenge there is that they're procrastinating on some elements and not being proactive on others. So once again, they also go through these cycles, but for a slightly different reason. In that when there's a deadline, suddenly shit gets done. It gets done very well. But if there's not, it ain't happening. So that's the crisis creator. Sally, I'm sensing there's an element there where we recognize
I was the student who always like left their homework till the night before, you know, that's all. And also then taking and being that yes person, taking on way too many things. Now, luckily, I have a team that's always pull me up and go, not too many bridges.
Love that. Love that. So that brings us very nicely on the not too many bridges to the last type of entrepreneur procrastinator, which is the novelty explorer. And this is a very interesting one because this often happens to serial entrepreneurs. It happens to people with big ideas, visionary entrepreneurs. And what they tend to do is they take on a lot of different projects. As you mentioned, maybe it's a couple too many bridges. So when we're doing that, the challenge there, and this is that type of procrastination, is that you're procrastinating by doing so many different projects and not focusing on one. So what happens is your time becomes diluted. And even though you think you're being productive, it actually ends up being detrimental to the impact that you can have long term. And I'll give you an example. There was a lady that I worked with in China called Jubei. She was part of an education company, had, I think, 30, 40 different employees. And when we spoke to her about the business and we started to dive into depth, what we found is most of her income, like 90% of the income, was coming from 10% of her clients with one business model. And that was funding all the other different ventures that they had, everything they had. There was very few profitable things that they were doing in the business. And I asked her, why don't you just focus on that one area? She said, well, I just love exploring new things. I like doing that. Blah, blah. I'm like, that's cool. That's fine. But what's very important is to understand the impact that it has on your business long term. And this is where being smart about it, being aware of these patterns is very important. This is why I have it, because very often it's nice to just say, okay, yeah, that kind of resonates with me. And the truth is, we're not one or the other of these. I think it's important to get that caveat out there. Just like when you do Myers-Briggs, okay, there may be an element of truth, but what's more important is to use this as a tool to help you recognize the type of procrastination that is going on, so that you can then have different tools to be able to overcome it and actually move forward in a more sustainable way.
I love that. I was thinking, I'm a little bit of a couple of those. It's like the crisis one, leaving things to the last minute. And I'm definitely, what was the last one you called? When you said it, I just heard shiny ball chaser.
Novelty explorer, yes.
Novelty explorer. I wrote all the other ones down, but not that one. But yeah, I definitely agree that it's such a visionary thing, isn't it? We have all these big, beautiful ideas we want to try. And again, I'm lucky my team pull me in when I've got too many plates spinning.
Yeah. I mean, it's very fascinating. I often find that these patterns come in pairs. And what I mean by that, if we look into the stereotypical types of business owners, and once again, I say broad because I think we're elements of all of them. You have the artist, the creator, there's someone that has a passion for what they do. They love what they do. You wouldn't even have to pay them. They just love, they just enjoy it so much, right? So you get that kind of entrepreneur. They're the ones that struggle very much with the avoider and the dreamer. So for those sort of creatives, like that's something to bear in mind. When we look into those that are system managers, they like operations, they like their systems, their tech, they love all those systems in the background. often those people are the ones that struggle with perfectionism and worrying too much, right? So
Yeah.
those are the elements there. And then the last one is we look at business creators. We look at people that love starting different projects. And those types of people, surprise, surprise, often have the challenge of being a crisis creator and the novelty explorer. So what's cool is it just helps you identify what's going on. And then obviously you have to take the right steps to overcome it sustainably, so you don't go through these big oscillations of doing loads of work and then crashing and then loads of work and then crashing again.
I mean, it's like it's the being aware. It's in the knowing, right? It's once we can recognize that and pay attention to it and take a step back sometimes and ask ourselves those questions, that's when we all get that personal growth. I really love that framework that you have around that, and it's definitely going to give me a different way at looking at our clients as well. I'd never really put them into those types of categories. This is really, really awesome. And I love this type of content and hearing people's frameworks that they teach around. There's always, like you were sort of talking about, the Myers-Briggs. And, you know, I recently did I forget what it's called, From the Millionaire Mindset one as well. And just, I love all of the psychology behind the way all of us as business owners work so differently. But having this as a guiding framework. Now, if somebody's out there and they're thinking, oh, I'm not really sure what type of procrastinator I am, what kind of tips could you give to help somebody like that?
Well, my guess is they're probably a perfectionist. So the reason why I say that is they're like, oh, well, I've got to get this right, team. I'm only joking.
I love that. That's so good.
Oh yeah, you're stuck in analysis paralysis. It's so funny when sometimes I chat with clients and they're like, well, Ben, I'm not sure. I'm like, I'll make a decision, because otherwise we're just going to be chatting for a long time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that, if someone isn't sure about, which one they have, it's really not a big deal. And the reason why I say that is that this isn't something where, and you mentioned, the millionaire mind and the different frameworks they have, for example, with money, and which ones you are there. Are you a saver? Are you, I think they have the money monk and those different elements, right? It's also a fascinating framework. So this is where, with anything that you hear online, and there are so many different frameworks out there, it's just about getting those insights, as you mentioned, to yourself. And I think what's more important is figuring out, what do you want to do with that? Because obviously the first step is awareness. You can have that knowledge, you can read the books, you can do those elements. Then you have to actually implement some different techniques so that you can start to overcome this. So there's different elements for each of them. For example, the perfectionist is looking at 80-20. It's forcing yourself to say, you know what, it's perfectly imperfect, and that's okay. And allowing yourself to move forward and giving yourself that deadline of, okay, no matter what happens, I'm actually moving that forward. So there's different strategies for each of them that make sense. But I think what's even more important, and I like to share an analogy of a tree. So I want you to imagine that I'm an apple tree and you're a pear tree. Now, I could get an apple and I could stick it on a pear tree. Now, Sally, what would happen if you get an apple, a beautiful apple, mind you, and you stuck it on a pear tree? What would happen to that apple?
It would fall.
Yeah, it would fall. It would die. It'd be like, that ain't meant to be there, right?
Yeah, right.
What often happens in business is we try that strategy. We try an amazing apple. We're like, this is going to work. And we stick it on a pear tree. And that's where business owners say, oh, it didn't work for me. And you get an even shiner apple, you put it there. Oh, I guess that just doesn't work for me. Do you have any other strategies? And what often happens is, as business owners, we're looking for this strategy when what we need, in fact, is to change the root. Because once we change the root, then we become a different tree. And the reason why I say that is it's very important to actually figure out why it's happening. And we all have blind spots. We all have scotomas. It's figuring out, okay, once I'm aware of that, how can I actually overcome that consistently? Because I think the most important thing is getting that sustainable growth. So it's having that awareness, being able to go to the root of what is actually driving that, to then enable yourself to move forward.
And I like that you brought up the blind spots. We all have them, right? And half the time we don't really know that we have them until somebody points it out. And that's the importance of having like a coach like yourself, or somebody to guide you in those areas that you're stuck, but you're not quite sure why. I think it's super important. Also, like if you were procrastinating and it's holding you back in your business, what's some steps you would recommend to help pull you out of procrastination?
Sure. So I think when it comes to procrastination, there's obviously some different elements there, but I think the stereotypical one is you've got some different tasks and you don't know where to start. I literally had a client the other day calling me up. Was like, Ben, I got too much on. Where do I start? Right. And I said, listen, right, what's the first step? All right. And I think that's so important because very often we get overwhelmed with doing all these different things. And the first step is very important. An element that's kind of a prerequisite to that I think a lot of people miss is a concept called externalizing your mind. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of people keep everything they need to do in their head. They try and make decisions in their head. They're constantly working things out. Now, what is even more impactful is being able to externalize everything so it's out of your head, get it down on paper, get it down on a software, so you actually know everything that you need to do. And then actually look at it and work something out. And then you can use your brain for analyzing as opposed to trying storing and figuring out in your head. And that's where a lot of people get overwhelmed and procrastinating. So then once you've done that and you've externalized, then it's looking into breaking that down and saying, okay, how can I chunk? How can I batch, right? We mentioned this before we started recording. And I think that's batching of tasks is super important to be able to move forward. And there's a concept there called 100% complete, which I think a lot of people miss. And that is when you get something done, just get it done. Because otherwise you end up going back and forth, you procrastinate, and then you don't make enough decisions in your day to move forward. So I think that using some of those elements are really key, but ultimately it's focusing on the next step, being able to pre-plan things and actually prioritize and just do the first thing and then park everything else. Because you can't do everything at once and it's not going to work you just thinking about it. So this is where taking a bit of action, moving it forward is one of the best ways to just combat that, depending on the type of procrastination you have as a struggle.
Yeah, I like how you said, getting it done and finishing. There's a great book that talks, I can't think of the author's name, but he talked about, starting, you've just got to start. But then he wrote another book about giving yourself actually finishing something. And when we're chasing all of those different things, like jumping between the bridges and focusing on a multitude of things, it's called context switching, right? And we lose track of where we're going because we're jumping from one thing to another and not really utilizing the time. But yeah. I love how you said get it out of your head and put it on paper, because we tend to think in circles around and around and around. But once it's on paper, we can start post-it noting it, or I've got post-it notes everywhere and whiteboards and post-it notes of my friends.
Yeah. And I think it's fascinating because every entrepreneur has their own way of doing things.
Yeah.
And I think this is where I'm not here to have that prescribed method, because there are some entrepreneurs that like more freedom. Like they don't have a bit of structure, but at the end of the day, if I feel like this, I'll do that. And I'm like, if that works for you, cool. And there's other people that like, I need a strict routine. Like this is when I'm doing that task, that task, that task. And I think it's just finding your own rhythm and really working towards that, which I think is the most important element of being an entrepreneur. It's not modeling someone else. It's finding the rhythm that works best for you.
Yeah, grabbing a little bit of, like, all the different tips that you've shared here today have been awesome, but then finding the one that works for you. So what is your go-to? What is that thing that you do to pull yourself out of procrastination?
Sure, brilliant question. So there's a technique that I've used for a while, which is Morning Pages by Julia Cameron. And I often do this when I'm experiencing, like I'm procrastinating, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed and I don't really know where to start. And the technique is very simple. It used to be used for creativity. So how it would work is you would write down 3 pages in the morning, no more, no less. And it would force you to kind of write what's in your head. Why am I doing this exercise? This is boring. It's a nice day. I need to focus on this and this. And it just allows you to kind of like just externalize everything that's going on, but not just in a task perspective, but also your trail of thoughts. And what that tends to do is it tends to, once again, externalize it, get it out there, and then you can see things more clearly. And the reason why you stop at 3 pages is you're not going to go on a little rant for a long time, right? You have to stop. But it's a process which is a fantastic tool that I use and I go to and I teach to my clients to be able to deal with like a challenge there. And it's a tool you've got in your toolbox to apply when needed. So I think that's the element that is really important that I often go to when that happens. But with regards to the steps after that, so let's say, I'll give you an example. So I was meant to do a LinkedIn live yesterday, right? And I made the mistake. I'm like, I'm in the zone. I'm dominating this stuff. Like I'm doing the content. I'm like that. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to push it to tomorrow. That's okay. And I'm going to schedule it. And the biggest thing for me is getting it scheduled, because when it's scheduled, I get it done. And I'm very good at working to schedules. I have my own daily system. So I write things down every day of what I'm going to do. Obviously, everything else is on the calendar, but I like for my day just to kind of write it down. I'm like, okay, so this is chatting to Sally at my 7 a.m. I've got it there, nice and sorted. And that gives me a bit of space, which I think is really, really nice. Now, the one other thing that I do, which I think a lot of people miss, is that I see many people go to back to back to back to back tasks. And this is where recently I was chatting with a client and we were speaking about this, about creating a buffer. Now, what I mean by a buffer is having space between each task so that you're not constantly going back to back, but giving yourself a break. And procrastination is where we're meant to be doing something, but we don't do it. Right. Yeah. So instead, I think one of the best ways is just to take a break. I think that as entrepreneurs, we put so much pressure on ourselves to get things done. And there's this hustle culture of doing things again and again and again. And I think that ultimately, give yourself a breather, chill out, just relax a bit. You know what I mean? Like go for a walk for 15 minutes, come back and then just do it then. It's okay. And I think that when we do that, we clear our mind, we get a bit of focus, then trying to cram something in after you've already spent 2 hours working in the day and you're already feeling pretty knackered.
Yeah, I am good at doing back to back to back to back myself. That's definitely something I need to work on. But because I've now got the podcast manager and, you know, the designer and everything working on the podcast, for example, they've been blocking in my podcast day and they've given me a buffer between each episode. So I can get up, I can go for a walk, I can put my feet in the grass for a moment. So yeah, it's such a handy and a great tip there is to allow yourself those times. So, you know, I mean, I even tell my VA sometimes, you know, pop in the calendar that I, you know, need to go and have lunch with my husband or or I need to ring the vet because I, you know, will forget. So it has to be in my calendar. And luckily my amazing Chris literally make sure I don't run late for everything. The other thing I heard you talk about is, you know, writing 3 pages, no more, no less. The first thing that came to my mind when you said that was blank page. And then you said, why am I doing this when you start writing? So I would do that where I would sit down to start writing things, but I would be thinking, why am I doing this? While I should actually be writing it down. And I'm actually going to give that a go. That is such a, like, I just saw blank pages, but now I'm like, actually think about all the silly things in my head and just write, which is something I've always wanted to be able to practice to do more, but I do tend to sit and stare at that blank page for a long time. So you're giving some great golden gems, or gold gems they call it. Is it? Yeah, dropping
gold
gems.
Gem, gold nugget. You can call them whatever you want, really.
On Clubhouse, they always you're dropping a gem. But this is some fabulous content, and I'm sure lots of people out there who are watching may want to ask a question. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat box as well, because we can bring them up on screen, and we can certainly ask Ben while we're here if you're watching live. So don't be shy, just putting it out there. Now, also, what we love to do is we have what we call our sparkle questions that we ask at the end of every session to find out a little bit more about you. So what is one thing, we have 3 of these. So what is one thing you wish you had known before you began your career?
Oh, I love a good question, Sally. You know, I love a good question. This is lovely. Okay, I'm going to go straight in and speak about a concept which I wish I knew, which is skill stacking. It's also referred to, for example, by Meg Jay as identity capital. But the reason why I'm saying this is because I think this is such a cool concept that if I had applied previously, I think it would have made an even bigger impact on where I am now. And how it works is very simple. When we look into any industry, you have experts in different elements, right? If we take you as an example, right? Obviously, expert in marketing, you've got your funnels, you've got your systems, there's different things there. But there's also speaking on video. There's other elements there that are also included. So when we look into our careers, one of the best pieces of advice that I give now and that I wish I knew back then was, what are the skills that you need in order to create the career that you desire? And writing down the top 10 core skills, and then actually looking at how do you develop them as you build your career. And the reason why that's important is because it's very easy for us to just focus on growth. It's focused on business and it's moving things forward. But in the background, if you're starting to develop those skills, what it does is it allows you to grab opportunities that you wouldn't have been able to access had you not worked on those skills previously. So I'll give you an example. So I was working on my Chinese because I thought this is a great market to be able to influence and to be able to have an impact with. And I was teaching TEDx public speaking for a few years. And then I spoke to the host and I said, I want to do a TED talk in Chinese. She said, Ben, you've never done a talk in Chinese. I said, I know, but I'm going to do one. I'm going to do it on a TED stage. And it'll be great. So I know her quite well. We had a bit of banter. And if I hadn't had that foundation, that wouldn't have been possible. And that's a different topic. Hilarious story. I literally almost forgot what I was going to say on stage. I learned the whole thing off by heart, Sally. Can't even tell you how stressful that was. Yeah. And so that's that element. So the reason why I'm saying this to ultimately bring it back is that when we understand those skills and we look forward and we look for the mentors and we look for those opportunities, it can just allow us to move forward. And there was a book I read recently, and my neighbor gave it to me, which is called Happy, Sexy Millionaire. It's actually a pretty good book. And he talks about this skill stacking. I really like the way he phrases it. And he says that I was called the best in the world at social media. And I was like, but I'm not the best in the world. But what I realized is I was the best at social media. I was the best at public speaking. I'm very good. And he was like, I'm top 5% for each of these categories, which makes me very different. And I think that's when we develop that, it makes us different and it allows us to differentiate ourselves and be unique compared to other people in the market, which is fantastic when we're a global society connecting with so many different people and we think about what is the difference that makes the difference. And that's where skill stacking is a brilliant tool to use.
What a great idea about thinking before you're even starting and all those things you want to add to. Of course, we've got our, zone of genius that we love to play in, but there are all those other things that we need to learn and maybe not always love, but we still need to learn them. It's like, when I first had to get into Xero, I was like, ugh. I love sexy numbers and give me spreadsheets and post-it notes, but getting into Xero, I was like, but I have to learn it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are those things that sometimes you have to learn to ensure that you do have success and grow. That's great. All right. My next question for you, we always have 3 sparkle questions, is what is something that you've been through, whether you would see it as a failure or something that you've really learned from, like a hard struggle that has really helped to define who you are and you really learned from it?
So I think the hardest struggle that I've ever been through was what I said previously about losing my dad to suicide. Like that was probably the biggest growth moment. And the reason why I'm referring to that is because when we say how it defines who you are, I would consider that one of the most defining moments. There have been other failures that I've had in business, but I don't think it impacted me the way that did. And the reason why I say that is that when we go through any challenging moment in our life, it can often give us that pivot or that change in a different direction. Yeah. And when that happened to me, I went through this very challenging period of depressed. I was sad. I didn't know what to do. I was doing everything that I teach not to do now. So there's obviously that element there, but that really influenced me in what is it that I wanted to do and move forward. And I think that from there, I didn't just think of, influence like who I am, like who are you? But even more so thinking about who must I become in order to move forward in a different way. And I think that's a great concept because often when we look at our past and we look at the experiences we've gone through, we often base who we are on our past. But if we always look for our past to define you, we can never be who we need to be in order to live the future we desire. And that's where I think it's really important to understand the challenges that we've been through, just to relay it back to those listening and actually move forward in a way that's sustainable and say, okay, well, now that I've been through that, who do I actually want to be in the future? And we don't have to do anything in order to be a certain way. It's about acting and being that now and ultimately having that influence on yourself and everyone around you.
How just beautifully said. I honestly, I don't even need to add to that. I think that is just so beautifully said. And we all struggle. We all have things that we've been through in life, but they all turn into that turning point. It just depends on what you're going to do with them, right? And such a positive way to look at things. Oh, Ben, you're amazing. I love chatting with you. We had so much fun on your podcast, and now I'm really enjoying myself being on the other side where I get to dig around in your grey matter for a while. Awesome. All right. My next question for you is, what are, 2 to 3 of the best resources that you've come across that really have helped you along the way?
Ooh, some resources that have helped me along the way. Okay, the first resource I'm going to do is something that I started doing back when I very first started my business. And I had a conversation with literally one of my best mates who started doing this. I've taught him for years. And he goes, I don't know why I didn't do it earlier, but I'm so thankful. I just want to say that I love you, bro. And I'm doing it now. And it's making a big difference. So, yeah, it's only been a few years, but yeah. And it's called a weekly evaluation. Okay. And the reason why I say this is a resource is this is something that all of us can do, and it's game changing. And this is how it works. When most of us set a goal, we set a goal out there, and then very often we forget, right? We want to do it, we just forget. Now, what a weekly evaluation does is, as Sally has asked some brilliant questions today, we ask questions to ourselves that help redirect our focus so we see if we're moving forward. Very simple example. You want to start being consistent with social media. Okay. You ask the question, was I consistent on social media this week? And you go, no. All right. So the next week you'd ask the same question. And you're like, no. And it's kind of like having a parrot in your ear being like, yo, did you get your shit done? And when I first started, and I didn't have any coaching, I didn't really understand the concept. This was a fantastic tool, which I still use now. I do it every week. And I have a series of different questions for different elements of my life. And it's one of the best things that I've done that helps me stay on track. Are you living by your energy principles this week? How have you managed your time? How will you manage it better next week? And just those little questions. And I usually do it on a Sunday. When I first started, it took a couple of minutes. I was like, how did the week go? I just reflect. And I think by doing that, this is a great element to add into your routine to reflect and actually help you move forward in a really sustainable way. So that's the first thing I'll say, which I think is a really cool tip. Next, I want to share about being able to find a good mentor and resource. And I remember when I went to China, I met this guy called the Suited Monk, and I was like, this dude's cool. I like him already. What a cool brand, right? Anyway, I remember meeting him and I'm like, he's doing exactly what I want to do. He's got his business in China. He's expanding really well. I love his brand. This is when I first got started. I'm going to make him my best friend. I don't even care. Well, we're going to have a wild time. And I went out with that intention. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the people that we spend time with is often who we become. And I think that when we look into creating those resources, and the reason why I'm not sharing a resource specifically is I think being able to create that own resource is even more powerful than just sharing a resource that may not be relevant for people listening. So that resource of being able to find that person. And now, we chat every month or so. We get on like a house on fire. We've been, all over the world connecting. I've spoken at his events, taught some of his concepts, taught some of the concepts that were horrible. And he told me on stage, he's like, Ben, you screwed that up. And I'm like, okay, sorry. We've had a lot of fun there. But I think being able to be exposed to people like that, I think is super, super important.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say, go on, Sally.
I 100% agree. Finding a mentor, I think, is so vital. And that's a huge thing that I have. Like, people wait too long to find a good mentor. And it takes a little bit of, finding and testing and trialing to find them. But once you do, like, it's a game changer. Yeah. It's such a great, And your final one?
The final one I was going to add is something that I've been doing for a long time, and that is listening to different books on Audible. So I really enjoy Audible. I enjoy Clubhouse. I enjoy listening, but I really enjoy listening on like 2 times speed or 2.5 times speed. And I know this is going to sound silly, but the reason why is because it helps me to understand things faster so that when I work with people, and this is just for me personally, so when I work with people, I can differentiate between the story they're saying and the actual pattern underneath. And that's actually been very helpful. So by doing that, I can take in all this like knowledge, understanding, and I can process it faster so that when I do speak to people, it just allows me to connect. And it also means that when you're on a walk, you're on a run, you're using that time to just develop yourself, understand different concepts, especially in different industries. And I think we don't often do that enough where, we're in this industry, but how often do we look into something different? I remember looking into Michael McIntyre, loving what he does on stage. And I'm like, I want to do some of that. And I look into how do you be a comedian? How do you do stand-up? And that is a fun element that I like to do when I speak on stage. I just like to have a bit of fun, right? And I think that's really cool. And yeah, for those listening, you can check out some YouTube videos. I've got like my TED talk there. I've got some different speaker reels. Like there's some fun things there, but adding that element, I think is super important just to allow you to move forward. So make sure to think about those different transferable skills as well, and those elements that you could bring in from a different industry.
Yeah, awesome. We have a question that's come in, and it is from Marion wants to know, how do you know if you're hanging out with the right people?
Okay, cool. So I think ultimately this is a question to consider when we think of, okay, if in our lives you're happy where you are and you think you're doing well and you're happy with the people that you spend time with, that's cool. But if you feel like they're negative and you don't enjoy their company, and if you're thinking of asking that question, even have that question, my guess is you're probably not, right? Because if you're doubting it, I'd probably go say, hang out with some new people, like develop a new tribe. And I think that I've heard different concepts of a third of people should be below you, a third of people where you are, a third of people above you. I don't really care about that. I really think it's about, finding people you get on well with that have a positive impact on you and actually spend time with them. I think a lot of people collect loads of friends along the way, but don't have those deep connections. I think being able to have those deep connections, chat to them at least once a month, having that positive impact, sharing different things is one of the best ways.
Yeah.
So what I'd say is to maybe write down those 5 people that you spend the most time with at present. Are you happy to be the average of those 5 people? If not, maybe switch it up a little bit.
Yeah. A quote that I got from a woman called Valerie Burton, who I absolutely adore, said to choose your friends wisely and nurture them. Sorry, choose your friends with intention and then nurture them wisely, so that, you're not just taking, but you're also giving the relationship. I think back to like my early sort of late teens, early 20s, I was surrounded by what I'd call bucket suckers. They were always negative and, the world owed them everything, but they didn't want to do anything. And I'd been friends with them for a really long time. But it was very hard to separate myself from them. But once I did, I just started to come ahead leaps and bounds. I mean, a lot of them would be lucky to leave the state, let alone, go overseas and travel, because they didn't have that bigger vision. So, the whole, you are the average of the 5 that you hang around with, but it is finding those that also serve you as well as you can serve them in return, I think really builds that connection. And lots of people come and go in our lives for different reasons. I've had many business friendships that have gone by the wayside, or things have happened, but I don't look at it at a negative point, but what did they bring to my life at the time they were part of it, rather than focusing on the bad, if, things don't always end well as well. So great question.
I definitely agree.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I was just going to add on to that. When we look into our friendships, one exercise that I did, someone told me to do it and I did it. It was actually pretty game changing. Was writing down every proper friend you've ever had in your life and seeing who you need to reconnect with. Now I know it sounds like a monster thing, but I did that. It was so cool to see who I reconnected with and who I forgot about. And I think that when we look into the 5 regrets of the dying, one of the regrets is I wish I'd stayed in contact with friends and family. And it's just a great exercise to do. It takes a bit of time, but I really enjoyed reconnecting with different people who I hadn't spoken to in years.
Oh, Ben, you've just given me so many things. I've got all these shiny balls to chase now when we're finished today. I'm going to be writing on paper and not staring at white paper anymore by writing, why am I doing this? And now I'm going to start writing a list of all these friends that they're always there, kind of in the back of my mind. I should reach out to them because I think about them all the time. So such great advice. I love hanging out with you, whether it's in Clubhouse, in podcasts, wherever we are. I felt like it's like having a coffee with a mate and chatting, but also hopefully dropping some gems for the listeners out there as well. Now, if you're listening, guys, make sure you let us know what are some key learnings and takeaways that you're getting from this as well. Now, my very last thing we always get our guests to do is to finish a sentence. So, I'm Ben and I sparkle because.
This is nice. Liking this. Okay. I'm Ben and I sparkle because I like to add light where there is darkness, and I like to do things a bit different.
Oh, So good. So good. Look, we love having you as a guest here on Straight Talk with Sally. And Ben, if anyone wants to find out anything about you or what you've got on offer at the moment, where can they go looking?
Cool. So, I mean, you can type in my name online, Ben Ivey, Ivey. I'm not a plant, and you should be able to find some info about me. You can check out the websites that we have too. Check me out on social media. My team will get back to you, or if I see it, I'll drop you a message. And I think that ultimately, I've got a ton of resources. If this is helpful, I can send you, a master guide on procrastination. I've got loads of different articles. So, there's loads of different resources. If anyone wants to reach out, I'm more than happy to ping some stuff your way.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you inside of Clubhouse and we'll share some stages together in the future.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much today. And look, we've got some messages coming in. People are sharing. Feel free to comment, guys. I'm loving my new Play app that we've got going on here. See all like these happy little messages coming in for you as well, Ben. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks again, Ben. Have a fabulous day. Now, everybody else, this is the end of today's batching day. We are all done and dusted. We've had some amazing speakers on today. Now, if you want to join us for a batching day, then we run them every other Friday. Well, Thursday, depending on where you are in the world, but we start on your Thursday if you're on the other side of the world, our Friday morning, and we go all day. We try to get 3 to 4 episodes done in a batching day. So I hope for those that have joined us or catch or any of these on the replay that you've had some really awesome key takeaways. And we're only just starting to roll out these batching days, and we are opening up a VIP room for anyone who's interested in joining us in a batching day where you can come in, you can ask questions, you can hang out with us, and we're making it more pretty every single week or every other week. But thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again to Ben. Some sparkle hands, Ben. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'll throw those sparkles hands out there, definitely.
Excellent, guys. Well, awesome fun. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, never let anyone dull your sparkle, and make sure you get at least one income producing activity done each and every day. I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.